Around 7 years ago, I got myself a PlayStation 3 in order to play a couple of console exclusives. But before I knew it, I started amassing more and more games for it, partly because I was gifted some, but mainly because I enjoyed using the console. So today I thought I would share some of my favorite PS3 games with you. I think I've got a pretty good mix of popular and obscure titles, so hopefully you'll find something interesting you've not heard of before. Before starting the list, I just want to point out that I excluded some specific games because I prefer them on PC. Oblivion, Skyrim, Fallout 3 and New Vegas, and GTA 4 and 5 are probably the most notable ones. Alright, let's get started, and keep in mind that this list isn't in any particular order. Red Dead Redemption. This is a pretty good one to start off with. I think most people will know about this game. Essentially, it's a GTA game that's been reimagined in a Western setting. That's pretty awesome if you ask me, but that's not the only reason why I like this game so much. There's a distinct atmosphere throughout the game. The seemingly endless deserts, thick forests, and forlorn towns, along with the desaturated color palette, give off a melancholy vibe that I just love. Another thing that helps is the sound and the music. The area you get to explore is quite big, especially if you consider that most modes of travel aren't particularly fast. And even when just wandering around, there are things happening, like people being chased by the local wildlife, bandits terrorizing towns, or people stealing horses, so there's always something to do. If you don't like GTA games, I would still recommend checking out Red Dead Redemption, since it's a very different experience overall. Multiplayer isn't bad either, though I usually don't do the multiplayer thing in general. There is an expansion pack called Undead Nightmare with zombies, but I don't know what that's like since I don't have it. But you can get a version of the game that comes with Undead Nightmare, so might as well pick that up if you can. 3D Dot Game Heroes. Not the best name ever, but it's a very decent game. 3D Dot Game Heroes is a Zelda-style adventure which combines 3D graphics with traditional 2D Zelda top-down gameplay. And a ridiculous sword, apparently. In terms of gameplay, it feels like a cross between the first Legend of Zelda and Link to the Past. The map, castle, and towns give off a Link to the Past feel, but the dungeons are much more reminiscent of the original Zelda on the NES. I really like how over the top they went with the water reflections and things like that. It's kind of a funny contrast. The game isn't ashamed of being a Zelda clone, and is fun throughout. You can pick what your hero looks like, or even make your own from scratch. Even though the sword is huge, it's only like that if your health is actually full, so it's kind of comparable to the sword shooting thing in the original Zelda. Definitely a lot of fun and worth checking out if you like 2D Zelda games. Valkyria Chronicles. I try to mention this game whenever I can, because it's one of my favorites. Even though this game was re-released on the PC and PS4 with higher resolution and better performance, the PS3 version of Valkyria Chronicles still runs well and looks pretty good. It's an alternate reality World War II strategy RPG with third-person real-time elements combined with watercolor painting and anime aesthetics. On paper, that sounds a bit like a collision of many different things, but it certainly doesn't feel like it once you play it or look at it. You control different types of units and select which ones you want to control from an overhead view. Once you select one, it switches to third-person mode where it becomes real-time, except for aiming. There are a lot of missions you can play and a lot of characters you can choose to have in your squad, most of whom can die permanently if you aren't careful. I really like this story too. It forgoes the whole our side is good, the other side is bad nonsense, and explores many themes and topics a lot of war games prefer not to touch. I did a review of the PC version of this game before. It's a bit old, so it's not as good as it could be, but you can still check it out if you want to, and you can just click the little card thingy on the top right. Uncharted 2 and 3. Here's another popular franchise. The only reason I didn't mention the first Uncharted is because I don't own it, but I'm sure it's just as good. I mean, I played the demo and I didn't really notice anything too different except for the graphics. Uncharted is a linear 3D platformer, and I don't really have a problem with it being linear at all. I like that you often get the option of doing things in a more stealthy way, or you can just run in and shoot everything. The graphics are pretty awesome, and make full use of the hardware. I find the gunfights to be very fun and challenging at times too. The platforming elements are well done, although usually simple. The best part about the Uncharted games is that it never gets frustrating. The dialogue is pretty cheesy, and some things, like rickety bits of the environment making a noise or crumbling away when you walk over them, are really predictable. I like to call that environment jump scare, Like in a horror movie or game, you can sometimes predict a jump scare, but you never know at what exact second it will happen.
Sully, your first car.
Driver San Francisco. I love the original game in the series, and out of all the most recent releases, Driver San Francisco is the closest to the original. You'll have to excuse this early game footage. It seems that my save game didn't survive the transition from my slim PS3 to a super slim. As you can imagine from the name, it's a driving game which takes place in San Francisco. The storyline is kind of silly. For some reason you can switch between cars at will, but who cares what reason the game gives you? It's just fun. There's a lot of fully licensed cars you can drive around in, a lot of which aren't available for sale in the US, which is kind of funny. You can also buy more cars with money you earn later on. The engine sounds are pretty good, with a couple of exceptions though. Notably, the Group B Audi doesn't sound anything like its real-life counterpart. It doesn't even sound like a 5-cylinder engine. My favorite thing to do in this game is to take an American car from the 60s or 70s and just rip around through the city as fast as possible, as sideways as possible, while trying to avoid hitting things like cars or walls. The damage models look great, and because it's a game you don't have to worry about smashing up a classic. Or killing people, I guess. The people do run out of the way though. Tomb Raider. I've been a fan of the Tomb Raider series since the beginning, having played the first 3 games when I was a kid. This is certainly very much a reinvention of the series, and despite the many differences to what I remember from my childhood, I think it's a very good game overall. As a lot of people have mentioned before, it feels really similar to the Uncharted games, though there are some obvious differences as well. I like how Tomb Raider takes place on an island, and there are instances where you re-explore places you've already been to. There are some creepy and disturbing elements in the game that I like, and things like gunfights and platforming are a lot of fun, though the quick time events are tedious and don't contribute positively to the gameplay, I think. There are things here and there I think could be improved, but the biggest problem with the game is the camera for me. It moves around so much that it makes me motion sick. I can't play this game anymore because of that. I had a massive headache after recording this footage, even though I was playing for like only 15 or 20 minutes. I had something similar happen with Minecraft, but that could be fixed by changing the field of view. King of Fighters 13. Here's another game I reviewed before, but for the PC. Doesn't really matter which version you choose though, since both feel the same to play. KOF 13 is my favorite fighting game. It has smooth gameplay mechanics that are easy to learn but hard to master, a good amount of varied fighters to choose from, and really awesome 2D visuals with great animations. If I want to play a fighting game, I usually just play this. You can check out my review if you want more info, or look for YouTubers who, unlike me, know how to play fighting games properly. Tekken Tag Tournament 2. This is another fighting game I quite like. I have to say I'm considerably worse at this game than King of Fighters. I like the crazy character designs, though I can only play one well, kind of. The music is really good and everything runs at a smooth 60 frames per second, which you can't see in the video because I didn't record it at 60 FPS. Hard drive space is precious after all. I like when fighting games have a lot of variety, that way there's always something to do if you get tired of one game mode. I will mention that I probably would have put Dead or Alive 5 on the list as my favorite 3D fighter, but I prefer that on the PC and current gen consoles. Disgaea D2. I always liked me some Disgaea, and I've not played a game in the series that I didn't enjoy. If you don't know, Disgaea is a turn-based tactical RPG that goes deep. The grind is real in this game. You're not only leveling up your characters, but you can also level up your items, which require you to go through floors of randomly generated levels. You still get to do things after the storyline is done, and the level cap of 999 isn't the end either. You incarnate your characters and keep leveling them up to make them even stronger. The reason I prefer D2 over Disgaea 3 and 4 is because unlike Disgaea 3 it has HD sprites, and unlike both of them it features the original cast of the first game, and it's great to see the characters again other than just a brief cameo appearance. Atelier, Rorona, Totori, and Meruru. The Atelier series is pretty niche, but nevertheless has a loyal following. The games are JRPGs with a strong emphasis on crafting and alchemy, as well as exploration and gathering. Of course there are fights too, but to me that's not the appeal here. Atelier, Rorona, Totori, and Meruru are part of what's called the Arlen trilogy. What I like about these games is the relaxed nature of them. There's a calm atmosphere about everything. And the storyline isn't about something that may or may not end the world, it's usually personal ambitions and goals, which is a nice change from what you see in fantasy games usually. Each game has a different plot, but the gameplay is mostly the same. The main character, whether it be Rorona, Tottori, or Meruru, are girls who want to become alchemists for one reason or another. In order to do that, you take on quests where you have to either kill certain monsters, gather specific materials, or craft items. There's a time limit for each game, and things like traveling between locations, for example, can take several days. Overall, I just found the games relaxing to play, and that's what I like about them. Atelier Rorona is the least good of the three games, I think, mainly because of the chibi-style graphics. I like Atelier Tottori and Meruru the best, not only because of the art style, but because of the expanded gameplay mechanics as well. FIFA Street. Sports games usually age pretty badly, but FIFA Street is an older sports game worth playing, even today if you like the genre. Unlike regular FIFA games, FIFA Street is more about tricks and skill moves. The number of players is less, and the pitches are smaller. That's a really small parking lot, I'm not sure how cars can even get in there. The graphics are pretty decent, and it's relatively easy to pull off some cool tricks right from the start. It's easy for developers to miss the mark completely when they try to look cool, but I think they did a good job when it comes to nailing the vibe of street soccer. There hasn't been a game like this since it was released, which is a shame, but that's also the reason why it's worth checking out. Okami HD, another one of my favorite games of all time. Okami HD is a remake and was originally made for the PS2 and later the Wii. While 3D Dot Game Heroes was a celebration of 2D Zelda games, Okami takes its inspiration from 3D Zelda games. That being said, it's very much its own thing. The game has a fantastic art style, it looks like a Japanese watercolor painting, and the story is based on Japanese mythology. In Okami, you play as the sun goddess in wolf form, notice how I dodged having to pronounce that name, and together with your sidekick Isun, you try and save the land from the evil Orochi, I think that's how it's pronounced. Like in Zelda, you've got an overworld to explore and dungeons to beat, but unlike Zelda, where you get more and more items as you progress through the game, Okami gives you brush techniques. You can pause the game and draw whatever you need to. It sounds like a tedious game mechanic, but it's not at all, because all you need to do is draw simple shapes like circles or lines. It's very context specific, so drawing a circle in the sky makes it day, while drawing one on the ground or some plants make them bloom. It's really well done. I can't say enough good things about Okami. It's not a difficult game, but it doesn't need to be, and it's an experience worth checking out. And if you're a subscriber and thought, hey, that sounded a bit familiar, that's because I just copied and pasted the script from my favorite PS2 games video. It's just more efficient that way. And the last game on the list, Hyperdimension Neptunia Victory. There are a lot of Neptunia games, but the series started on the PS3. The first game in terms of gameplay wasn't that great. The second in the series, Neptunia Mark II, and the third, which is what this is, are much better. If you're not familiar with the Neptunia series, basically, the main characters are goddesses who are personified versions of the game consoles. The plot is always lighthearted and silly, with a lot of meta humor. There's a bit of fan service here and there, and the gameplay is pretty standard for turn-based JRPGs, but the humor, characters, and sci-fi and fantasy hybrid setting set it apart from other games of this genre. Neptunia Victory, along with the two that came before it, have been remade for both the Vita and PC, but if you have a PS3, I think it's still worth checking out Victory, since it's very similar to the remakes anyways. And if you're a fan of Nepgear, consider picking up Mark II instead, or as well, since the storyline features her instead of Neptune. That concludes the video. Hopefully you enjoyed taking a look at all these different games with me. There's a lot of variety on this list, and hopefully you found something new and interesting. If you would like to support me, you can check out Patreon. I also stream on Twitch if you're interested in that sort of thing. And if you want to keep up to date with what I'm doing, I've got a Twitter page as well. All the links are in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.